I still remember the sound my heels made on the lobby floor of that building, sharp, hollow, just a little too loud. Like I was announcing something I didn't mean to. It was 1953, and I had just turned 20. I wore my best skirt, navy wool, hem just below the knee, and a blouse with pearl buttons Mama had sewn back on 3 times that spring. My resume was folded neatly into a manila envelope. No creases. No smudges. Just paper and hope. I was there for an interview. But I was also there for something else. Something I couldn't name back then. Most girls I knew weren't working. If they had jobs, they were temporary. Secretaries. Receptionists. Shop girls. They earned pin money, as my aunt used to say, like it was loose change between dishes and diapers. But I wanted something different. Not forever. Just something. Something with a desk and a paycheck and a nameplate that said more than Mississippi. Daddy didn't understand. "You'll meet someone soon," he'd say, folding the evening paper. "No need to get all tangled up in offices." Mama just smiled, that quiet kind of smile that women wore when they wanted to say more, but didn't. I loved them both. But I still put on my navy skirt. And I still walked into that building. The office was on the 4th floor. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Part nerves. Part pride. I told myself I needed the steps to settle my breathing, though every floor only made my heart beat louder. By the time I reached the receptionist's desk, I'd already rehearsed my answers a dozen times in my head. Yes, I can type 70 words a minute. Yes, I'm familiar with the Royal 10. Yes, I'm eager to contribute. What I didn't rehearse was how to sit. It felt like a test. Do I cross my legs? Fold my hands? Smile or stay neutral? Turns out, it didn't matter. Because before I opened my mouth, the woman behind the desk, a blonde with perfect lipstick and a name tag that said Joyce, looked me over and said, "Oh. You're here for the junior clerk position?" "Yes," I said, surprised she knew. She nodded slowly. They were hoping for someone more modern. I blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You know," she said, lowering her voice like it was a kindness. "Shorter hair. Maybe slacks. A little more confident." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Like confidence was a shade of lipstick you could borrow. Like ambition was something you had to wear just right. I sat anyway. Waited 47 minutes before a man in a gray suit came out and called my name without looking at me. "Lot," he said, like it was a question. I stood. Smiled. Followed. The interview was short. Too short. He asked about my schooling, then interrupted to ask if I planned to marry soon. I said, no. He raised an eyebrow like I'd said something shameful. Then he asked if I'd be willing to make coffee for the office, from time to time, even though it wasn't in the job description. I said, of course, because what else could I say? He smiled. A tight smile. One that didn't reach his eyes. And then he said, "Thank you for coming in." No handshake. No follow-up. Just the sound of my heels again, sharper this time, as I walked out the door. I didn't cry. Not until I was halfway home on the bus, and the man next to me started talking about the baseball game the night before, and I realized he didn't see me at all. At dinner, Daddy asked how it went. I said, fine. He nodded. I told you it's not a place for girls. Mama said nothing. Just passed me the peas. Later that night, I found a note on my pillow in her handwriting. One line. You don't have to settle for fine. I applied again the next week. And the week after that. It wasn't about rebellion. or pride, or politics. It was just about wanting something more than being dismissed before you'd even had the chance to speak. People talk about the 1950s like it was all ice cream shops and jukeboxes and car hops and roller skates. But I remember the silences just as much as the songs. The way a room could decide your worth before you'd said a single word. The way you learned to fold ambition small enough to fit in your purse, just in case someone saw it and called it by the wrong name. The second offer came in a letter. Typed. No greeting. Just my name, a date, and a time to report to the office at 8:30 a.m. sharp. No congratulations. No mention of my interview. Just a sentence that sounded more like a summons than an invitation. But I smiled anyway. Because I had a job. It was a bank. Not the kind with marble columns or gold pens on chains. Just a single-story building off Main Street with dusty blinds and a row of beige desks. Nothing glamorous. Nothing loud. But I had my own drawer. My own name on the clipboard. A tiny chair, a pencil sharpener, and a task list typed by someone I never met. They called me the new girl. No one asked my name that first week. The women in the office were all older. Some wore brooches shaped like leaves or little gold birds. Some smelled faintly of powder or cinnamon. They wore soft shoes, and their hair was always done, even on Fridays. One woman, Dorothy, kept a photo of her Pomeranian on her desk but no photo of a husband. They didn't smile much. But they watched. Every move. Every mistake. Every inch of posture and silence and breath. At lunch, they sat together in the break room. I brought mine in a paper bag and ate on the bench behind the building, even when it rained a little. My work wasn't hard. But it was small. Filing slips, stamping dates, typing balances into ledgers. Numbers and folders and soft carbon paper that stained your fingers if you weren't careful. Sometimes I stayed late to get ahead. But no one ever noticed. They only noticed when I used the wrong font size on a withdrawal slip. Or when I forgot to call a customer, sir. The first real conversation I had was with a woman named Helen. She wore navy every day and smelled like Vicks. One afternoon, as we were restocking envelopes, she leaned close and whispered. "You remind me of me, when I thought this place would change something." I asked what she meant. She smiled, not kindly, not unkindly. Just knowingly. "You think you're in, dear. But this place isn't built for you. You're temporary comfort. Not permanent presence." Then she handed me a pack of envelopes and went back to humming softly, like she hadn't said anything at all. I thought she was bitter. I thought I'd be different. I thought I'd earn my way in. So I stayed. One morning, the branch manager, Mr. Lawton, called me into his office. He didn't offer a seat. He looked over his glasses and said, "You've been doing fine work." I smiled. "Thank you, sir." "But," he added, dragging the word out like a drawer, "there have been a few comments about your attitude." I blinked. "Sir?" "Your posture," he clarified. "The way you walk." A few clients found it assertive. Assertive. Like it was a stain I couldn't see. That weekend, I practiced walking differently. Shoulders down. Elbows close. Eyes lower. I didn't want to lose the job. But every adjustment felt like peeling off a layer I didn't realize I'd grown. By the third month, the compliments started. But not the kind you write home about. "You've got good ankles for typing." "Such a nice smile, you should use it more often." "I bet you make a mean casserole." I smiled. Because that's what was expected. Because saying nothing felt safer than asking why. Helen watched me one day as I retyped a letter because I used yours sincerely instead of very truly yours. She said, "You'll wear yourself out trying to fit the dress they've already sewn for you." I said, "It's better than being naked." She looked at me, really looked. Then said, "Is it?" The day I gave my notice, I wore red lipstick. The kind Mama said was too bold for a girl still under her father's roof. I walked into Mr. Lawton's office, letter in hand. He read it. Blinked. "What prompted this?" he asked. I said, "I've decided I want more." "More money?" "No," I said. "More me." He leaned back like I'd slapped him. "Don't expect many places to take that attitude," he muttered. "I'm counting on that," I said. When I told Daddy, he frowned. "When you gonna stop chasing shadows, kid?" "When they stop casting them over everything," I said. He didn't understand. But Mama did. She nodded and said, "Let her run." I didn't get another job right away. I volunteered at the library. Helped a neighbor start a sewing circle. Read a book about Eleanor Roosevelt and copied one quote into my journal. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I never regretted leaving. Because that job, the one I almost kept, wasn't work. It was a soft prison with good lighting. And I knew if I stayed long enough, I'd decorate my cell and call it home. I didn't leave the bank and walk into a destiny. I walked into a Tuesday. The morning after my notice took effect, I woke to the same street, the same milk bottle sweating on the stoop, the same neighbor calling her boy in before school. I scrubbed the sink. I wrote 3 letters I didn't mail. I took my navy skirt to the cleaners even though it didn't need it. Then I went to the library. It wasn't a grand building, no dome, no marble. Just a brick rectangle with windows that stuck in summer. The librarian, Mrs. Keene, wore horn-rimmed glasses on a beaded chain and spoke like each word had been approved in advance. When I asked if she needed help, she looked me over the way Joyce at the reception desk once did, but something kinder lived behind it. "We can always use hands on Tuesdays," she said. We reshelve, mend, and put out the new cards. That afternoon I learned the difference between 808.5 and 810, how to paste a loose hinge without gluing the whole book shut, and where the quilting circle stored their minutes in a shoebox labeled newsletters even though they were neither news nor letters. On my way out, Mrs. Keene said, "You're steady. Come back next week." I did. Volunteering wasn't a job, but it was work. And work turned into people. There was a woman named Ruth who read every gardening book we owned and still killed every fern she touched. There was a boy who checked out the same aviation manual 10 times and told me he'd fly to California one day. There was an older man, Mr. Denton, who struggled through the newspaper with a finger under each line, refusing the magnifier with a stubborn dignity I recognized. On a rainy Tuesday, Mrs. Keene asked if I'd sit with Mr. Denton during the storm and help him with the obituaries. "He likes to know who's gone," she said, with a librarian's odd, practical tenderness. I read aloud. Slowly. Carefully. Names and dates and the small sentences people pay to have printed when they are too tired to do the talking themselves. Mr. Denton listened like it mattered that they were said right. When we finished, he patted my hand. "You read like you mean it," he said. No one at the bank ever noticed how I read. By autumn, the library had me 2 nights a week in the basement classroom. We held literacy evenings for grown men from the rail yard, for mothers who wanted to read to their children without skipping the hard words, for a girl who said she was bad at school but could recount the plot of any movie in exact, dazzling detail. I made flashcards on the mimeograph machine and went home smelling like solvent and paper. I learned to keep extra pencils in my purse, to laugh when the radiator hiccuped mid-lesson, to wait through silence without filling it for people. At the end of the first session, Ruth, the fern killer, stood awkwardly in the doorway and said, "I read a whole page to my daughter last night." "Which book?" I asked. She named it. Not poetry. Not scripture. A pamphlet that came with the sewing machine she'd bought used from a cousin. "It counts," I said. She nodded, and something in her posture moved an inch toward upright. The bank called in December. Mr. Lawton's secretary, someone newer than me, said there'd been unfortunate departures, and would I consider returning, in a more senior capacity. I thought of my red lipstick in the wastebasket, of Helen's navy cardigans, of the way my name had disappeared into New Girl. I thought of Mr. Denton and Ruth and the way the boy traced plain wings with a pencil on scrap paper. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "No." The line went quiet. I heard the click of a pencil against a desk. "May I ask why?" I looked at the calendar the quilting circle had left on the table, Tuesdays circled like small promises. "I found work that uses me," I said. "All of me." The pencil stopped clicking. "Well," the woman said at last, professionally polite, "good afternoon." "Good afternoon," I said, and hung up. My father didn't call it a job, but he stopped calling it foolishness. Sometimes he walked me to the library and waited on the bench by the door with the evening paper while I taught. When we walked home, he'd ask, "How many today?" and I'd give him numbers, 14, 9, once 23 when the rail yard had a schedule change and the men arrived in a wave. He didn't say, "proud," but he didn't need to. He asked questions, which was his way. Mama kept leaving notes. Folded in cookbooks, tucked under the sugar jar, slipped into my coat pocket, single lines, simple as scripture, "Keep the best of you busy. No one knows what you're worth better than you." And once, copied from a magazine, "Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace." She wrote, Amelia Earhart, in neat parentheses, as if I'd not trust her otherwise. In 1956, Mrs. Keene asked if I'd consider taking a small stipend and formal hours. "It will satisfy the board," she said. "And perhaps your father," with a smile that wasn't unkind. The title on the typed sheet read Assistant for Community Programs. It fit like a borrowed dress, but it was something to pin to my blouse when people asked at weddings and funerals, "Now, what is it you do?" I said, "I help people read," and watched their faces decide whether that was enough. It was enough for me. I saw Helen from the bank once in the Woolworths 5 and 10. She was standing by a display of brooches shaped like tiny telephones. She recognized me first. "Still reading," she said, as if the word were a city she'd once visited. "More than ever," I said. She touched a brooch and didn't pick it up. "They made me supervisor," she said in a voice that had both victory and ash in it. "I have a bigger desk and a nicer stapler." "And a better chair?" I asked, half teasing. She laughed, surprised. "No. Same chair. But I know which screws hold, now." We stood between costume jewelry and dish soap and talked until the clerk rattled his keys. Before we parted, she put her hand over mine and said, "You were right to go. Seeing you reminds me there were other doors." I walked home with a paper bag of soap flakes and a sense that not all women need the same map to avoid getting lost. The years folded. I married a man who didn't ask me to choose between my work and our home because he didn't call what I did a hobby. We didn't have children right away, and when we did, I read them the train schedules and the hardware catalog in the backs of cereal boxes like they were literature. On Tuesday nights, their father bathed them in braided hair he never mastered and warmed soup I'd left in a pot, and nobody took attendance over who did which. By the early 1960s, the basement classroom had grown into a proper program with printed flyers and a battered Remington the board approved, for necessary correspondence. A local AM station gave us 15 minutes on Thursdays to read community bulletins and a poem. The first time I heard my voice come back at me through the studio headphones, I thought of Mr. Denton and the way names needed care. The station manager said, "You have a voice people trust." No one at the bank had ever found a use for that. Sometimes, at night, I'd think about the girls from my interview days. The ones with perfect lipstick and smaller dreams, the ones with larger dreams and smaller rooms. I thought of the sentence I'd written in my journal after Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, "Refusing to feel small is not the same as feeling big." It was a note to my future self as much as a record of my past. I kept the navy skirt. I wore it to funerals and to the dedication of our new library wing when the town finally admitted that words needed space. At the reception, Mr. Lang, the retired shop teacher, not the Lang of any street you know, tapped his plastic cup and made a toast, to rooms where people are not expected to be less. I swallowed hard and said amen under my breath. When Mama grew frail, I brought books in large print and read at her bedside, recipes she knew by memory, letters from cousins who meant well, chapters from novels we'd pretended were above us when we were young. One afternoon, she dozed and woke to find my hand still on the page. "You didn't settle for fine," she whispered. It was the last thing she said to me that sounded like instruction. After she passed, I found one more note in the hem of her sewing basket. It said only, "Keep choosing." I do. If you ask what became of Dorothy with the Pomeranian, she retired to Florida and sent postcards with palm trees and misspellings. If you ask about Ruth, she kept one fern alive for 3 years and cried when it finally went brown, then laughed and said, 3 years is more than I gave myself once. If you ask about that boy with the aviation manuals, he did fly to California. He sent me a photo of a sky so blue it looked foolish. If you ask about me, I'll tell you I never became a manager with a corner office. I became a woman whose Tuesday nights still matter. A woman whose voice reads names right. A woman who learned early that a door marked clerical can be a closet if you accept its label, and a hallway if you don't. The job I almost took would have taught me to be small beautifully. The work I chose taught me to be useful honestly. There were years I wanted more money. There were nights I wanted someone else to read aloud to me. There were mornings I put on the navy skirt and wished for a simpler world. But when I hold the worn library card in my hand, the one with 1,000 fingerprints ghosted into it, I know the ledger that matters balanced anyway. And on certain afternoons, when the sun hits the library windows and the room fills with dust that looks like glitter if you're inclined to hope, I hear Mrs. Keene's chain clink, and Helen's low chuckle, and Mama's pencil scratch in the margin of some recipe I will never master. I hear my own heels on a lobby floor that once felt like judgment and now sounds like beginning. If I could whisper one sentence to the girl in the navy skirt, waiting on that 4th floor chair while someone measured her confidence like a hem to be taken in, I'd say, "You don't need that job to have a life. But this life might need you." And then I'd hand her a Tuesday.